Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter-silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds and done 100 things you have never dreamed of, wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence, hovering there. I've chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air. Up, up the long, delirious, burning blue, I've topped the wind-swept heights with easy grace, where never lark or even eagle flew. And while with silent lifting mind I've trod the high, untrespassed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back into Bufnagle Podcast. I'm Zach, and as always, I'm joined by Rafe. Rafe, how are we doing today?
Zach, it is as always, it is a good day to do podcasting. I cannot think of, well, I'll change that. I can think of some things I'd rather be doing, but not a lot of them. And it's a great day to spend time with you. And I'm looking forward to another great show here today. I'd like to thank our listeners, of course. We appreciate having you here. It is no fun to do this without you, without knowing that you are out on the other end of this magic interweb machine. And I want to thank our sponsor again this week, Zach. Our friends at the Buck and Bull Boutique refused to let us go. They Kayla over at Buck and Bull Boutique creates handmade jewelry, gifts, decor, and clothing with new items released weekly. Custom orders are always welcome. So if you want to see some really neat, pretty stuff, if your house just feels a little bit, I don't know, a little dry and dusty, perhaps, then contact Kayla over at the Buck and Bull Boutique on Facebook and Etsy and see what she can do for you. Uh, Earrings and stuff, necklaces, centerpieces, potpourri.
Russian nesting dolls.
Russian nesting dolls of myth, I think, is one of those things. That's a joke you'll learn later. But yes, all those things are out there, and Kayla will take care of you at the Buck and Bull Boutique on Facebook and Etsy.
All right, that sounds fantastic, Rafe. Thank you to Buck and Bull Boutique for sponsoring us, for dealing with us, and more importantly, partnering with the Bufnagle family.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And tell them that we sent you, and then you'll get 15% off. How could I forget that, Zach? That is the pudding on top of the whipped cream on top of the cheesecake. That's 15% right there. That's what you need.
And with that 15% savings, you can get that cheesecake you described. And so that's a fantastic deal that we very much look forward to. Anyways, back to things that matter just a little bit more. Today, we are joined by a very good friend of ours, a big fan of the Buff itself, a former guest we've had on, America's favorite rocket scientist, Bob. Bob, how are you doing today?
Zach, I'm doing great. It's always a pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me back. I really appreciate it.
All right, awesome. Thanks for coming on in, Bob. So last time when you were on, you talked about some experiences you had with NASA, some other life things you've done, and then kind of how you've met us. And it's great for you to come back on.
Yep. So Bob, we got a lot of questions, and we had a lot of feedback on your visit here last time, whenever that was, last fall. And people said, I actually got emails that said, we want more Bob. So I
wow.
know.
Was there anybody other than me who sent that email?
Well, yeah, your son. I was able to detect your son's email address there. But hey, we got notifications. People wanted more of Bob, wanted more stories from the world of rocket science. And the biggest question we got from people was Bob worked there from 1985 to 1987. He must have been there during the Challenger accident. And
sure.
the listeners have noted that, and it has been coming up. Well, when we record this, it'll be 2 more days, or when this post, it'll be 2 more days till the 35th anniversary of the Challenger accident. So you were there, you experienced that. Can you tell us about that experience and the lead up into that in October of 1985.
I sure can, Rafe. I'm not at all surprised that the topic came up. Invariably, when I talk to someone and tell them about the fact that I worked at the Space Center, either they will ask about the Challenger, or it comes up as I describe it. So not at all surprised at the questions, and I do understand that people are curious, and I would be happy to answer your questions about that and talk about it. Obviously, it was a very difficult experience. Having been a space geek since as long as I can remember, going back to very young, when, for example, there's a picture of my mom took a picture of me sitting in the high chair in front of the television for Alan Shepard's flight, going way back when. So I've been a space geek.
So when was that? Alan Shepard's flight was 1960?
61, I want to say. I've slept since then. So I got to the Space Center down in Florida in October of 1985, and what I want to do before getting specifically into the Challenger accident is to kind of set the stage for what was going on then, because there was quite a lot going on then in the space shuttle program, and that was part of the reason why I was able to get hired there.
Yeah. So right. So the Apollo missions came and went, right, and they finished in the early 70s, and then there was this lull for a while the shuttle program got up and going, and that was kind of a late 70s, early 80s thing then. But by the time you got there, it was cranking up.
Yes, it was. I mean, the first space shuttle flight was with Columbia in April of 1981. And I was actually there to watch that, and that's a story we can talk about someday. But when I hired in at Launch Complex 39, where the vehicle assembly building and the launch pads for the space shuttle were, when I did that, when I hired in, we had just received the fourth of the orbiters. OV-104, which was Atlantis, named Atlantis. And Atlantis had flown once and was being prepared for its second mission. The very week I got there, the Discovery, OV-103, launched on another flight. And the Challenger was being processed for its flight in January. And also the Columbia was being prepared for a flight in December.
So for those people who may not follow this, the whole point of the shuttle was this reusable vehicle that you didn't have to send up and then lose the pieces and have to make new ones. The all of this stuff that got the rocket up there, the bird into the sky, a lot of it came back down and got reused and repurposed, and that was supposed to allow us to have a higher turnover and a more efficient space program.
Right. We were able to launch more. The idea was to launch more frequently for less cost, and that was the idea. At the time I was there, the program was really ramping up. As I said, we had the full fleet at that point, and we were doing a number of things. And to give you an idea of the number of things we were doing, the Discovery, for example, was intended to be the Air Force's shuttle orbiter. So that was supposed to go to California, to the Vandenberg Air Force Base, to fly polar orbit missions for the Air Force.
So we were going to launch from more than just Florida, right? They were going to launch from California as well.
Yep, we were launching from the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and three of the shuttle orbiters were supposed to stay there: Columbia, Challenger, and Atlantis. And then Discovery was supposed to go to Vandenberg to launch polar orbit missions. We also were preparing for 2 planetary missions. The Jupiter Polar Orbiter, which became known as Galileo, and the International Solar Polar Orbiter.
Wait. The International Solar Polar Molar, or what was
Something
it?
like that. It was the International Solar Polar Mission. ISPM, I believe, is what it calls. It's been a while, but
all right, I got you.
I'm pretty sure. And that was intended to go into a high inclination orbit over the poles of the sun, which from where we are in Earth or in Earth orbit, you don't get a good look at the poles of the sun. And the science that we wanted to do there, and this was a joint NASA and European Space Agency mission. And both of the, go ahead.
Yeah. So wait. So there's this. You're throwing all sorts of things at me, and I want to ask a lot of these questions. Okay. So when we launch, one advantage of launching from Florida, that the way I understand it is that it's pretty far south, right? Which gets you down near the equator, so you're zipping along a lot faster, and you get to take off to the east. Which kind of you want to go into the east because it gives you a boost because the Earth kind of slings you around, right?
The Earth is moving. The Earth is spinning.
Yep.
And that velocity counts as far as the amount of speed you need to orbit the Earth.
So you want to take off to the east.
Yes.
You want to be kind of south. If you could be at the equator, that'd be perfect, but we can't quite get down there. And another advantage of going from over the Atlantic there is you're over water. So you're not like flying over Albuquerque or something like that.
Right.
In some case something goes wrong. So there were things we're all planning and ready to fire up to launch from California, and they were going to go east from there as well.
No, they were going to go south because they were going into polar orbit. So just as and we've been launching polar orbit spacecraft from Vandenberg for quite a long time, even before this was planned, and it gives a clear launch path south, past Los Angeles, not over Los Angeles, but to the west of Los Angeles, and then over the poles.
So this solar polar thing. So that plan though was to orbit the sun.
Yes.
The polar orbit of the sun.
Yes, and the way it was going to get to that was by going to Jupiter first, and then
on the way.
Because yes.
Wow. Okay. No,
exactly. Because it was on the way. Because it was going to use a slingshot maneuver around Jupiter to change the plane of its orbit to go up and over, which is something you can do. It's
okay. Okay, I got it. So if we do a regular Earth orbit spacecraft thingy, that thing's going around a couple times a day, right? Or
well, depends on how high it is.
Right.
If you are at the normal 100-200 mile orbit, that's basically 90 minutes.
90 minutes. Okay.
Yep.
But if you're going to do a solar polar orbit, you're going to how many? That's got to be. Okay, so the way I'm thinking about this, the size of the sun is bigger. If you took the Earth and you put this moon around the Earth, that unit itself still fits well inside the sun, right?
Yeah.
Am I right in that? Right. So this is like a monstrously, gigantically huge orbit to send a spacecraft over the top of the. I mean, how?
Yeah, the idea was to observe the sun. It wasn't to get close to the sun.
No, so you're going to observe it how many times though? I mean, it's like how many laps can you do? It's got to take forever.
I don't remember the details of that mission. I didn't study before this conversation.
I'm so sorry you didn't.
I did. I went to the trouble to look up the name of the spacecraft, which was Ulysses.
Okay.
And other than that, that's all the research I did to refresh my memory.
All right. Well, we're going to ask any other.
So we were planning on launching 2 spacecraft to Jupiter in May of 1986, and that's basically bottom line. and they were going to use a new upper stage that was that would be launched within the shuttle payload bay. So the spacecraft and the upper stage would be in the payload bay, and the spacecraft, the upper stage was a liquid-fueled upper stage. It was based on the Centaur upper stage, which was basically the workhorse upper stage for planetary missions because of how efficient it was, because it was hydrogen fueled. And we can have a whole conversation about that, but not right now.
Okay, all right. So they're going to launch. There are other things planned. We only have.
Right. Zach, this is one of those times when like there's the script and you actually need to stay on it, and it's not just a blank canvas for you to like paint whatever you want it to be.
All right.
So back to the script.
As fun as that is.
All right, it's not a 6-hour episode this week, guys. All right, okay, so new launches coming up in May of '86, and you are on it
with an upper stage that's newly developed, that's has all kinds of interesting challenges, and something I was even reading about the challenges that this development was having even before I got there. So those are the things that were going on. We're ramping up flight rates. We've got all 4 orbiters. We're ramping up flight rates. We're going to send one out to California, and we got these 2 missions we're going to launch in May, 6 days apart.
All right, and so you guys are it's humming. Things are going. It is the place to be.
And so one of the first inklings I had of what was to come, and this was really interesting. So there was an old guy in our group. We called him Rock and Ray. He was probably not as old as I am now, but to us young 20-somethings,
he was really old.
He was an old guy, right? And one day he grabbed me and said, "Hey, new guy, we're gonna go over to the Launch Control Center, and you're gonna sit with me on console or something, and so where I worked, where our building was immediately behind the press site. So, we're in the shadow of the vehicle assembly building. The pads are 3.5 miles away, and the Launch Control Center is across, and the vehicle assembly building are across the street. So, we leave the building and we're walking, and somehow the topic got to, and it could have been that I asked him. I said, "What do you think about the Centaur upper stage and how that's going?" And what he said to me, I was not expecting. What he said was, I was on console in the firing room for the Apollo 1 fire. And this time here now reminds me of that time then, and that he was afraid that something was going to happen.
So the Apollo 1 fire was obviously early in the Apollo sets of missions. There was a fire on the launch pad. We lost 3 astronauts.
Yes,
and there was a short circuit somewhere, and they burned up on the pad.
The fire went through the spacecraft so quickly, they couldn't the crew outside couldn't open the hatch, and the 3 astronauts died.
So the guy you're working with is feeling he
was on the loop listening to that.
Yeah, so he heard it, and now here he is. It was like 19 years later.
From 1967, January 1967, actually January 27th, 1967, to January of 1986.
And he is feeling nervous. Did you ask him? I mean, did he share why that was, or did you just?
It was pretty self-evident. I was aware enough about the Centaur project and how it was going, and how risky it sounded to me.
Well, you're putting a hydrogen rocket inside the bay of a rocket. Okay.
That carried the crew.
Yeah.
All
right, and that was for that mission, but that wasn't the Challenger launch in January.
No, it wasn't. So we had that conversation, and that was kind of the first inkling. We flew, as I said, the first week I got there, we flew Discovery on a flight. We flew Atlantis on her second flight the Wednesday. I think it was the Wednesday before Thanksgiving, and then the next up was Columbia, and that was with the congressman. Actually, he was I'm struggling now to remember his name, but the congressman that represented the district that included the Kennedy Space Center.
So those launches were going, and they were going pretty well.
Yep, and actually, Columbia took 6 attempts. It was originally scheduled for right before our December shutdown for Christmas, and that launch got scrubbed, and it took I believe it took 6 attempts to get it off. Just
little
different things happened, and including one where they called a hold very, very late in the count, like last minute, and it turned out that a temperature probe had dislodged from one of the pipes for carrying either the liquid hydrogen or liquid oxygen, and had flowed through into the vehicle and was lodged in a valve for one of the engines. And someone on console absolutely made the right call based on so little information. They could easily have launched, and then found out that the valve didn't close, and if the valve didn't close, it would have blown up that engine.
Wow. So it's not clockwork. I mean, it's not like I go and start my car and it just starts. I mean, these things are highly complicated machines.
The space shuttle was a very complicated machine, and despite the idea that NASA had declared it operational after the first 4 or 5 missions, it was still a very experimental vehicle. And so that brings us to the Challenger. And the Challenger was originally scheduled to launch on the 26th of January. And it was carrying among other crew, the teacher in space, Krista McCall. And the launch on the 26th ended up being canceled because of weather. And there was a storm front that moved through exactly as predicted, and so they didn't fly that day. And then we had rescheduled for the next day, which was the 27th of January, which ironically was the anniversary of the Apollo 1 fire. And I was quite honestly actually surprised that they were planning on attempting a launch that day. I remember thinking that was really surprising to me, that they would do that. But they did. It turns out we didn't fly that day because they were having problems removing an exterior handle on the hatch for Challenger. And they had stripped a bolt or something, and they weren't able to get it out. And that ended up scrubbing the flight that day. And
so then the next day was the 28th.
Yes.
And it was cold that day.
It was very cold. And I remember coming into work early because it was supposed to be a morning launch, and I wanted to get there. There was a lot of interest in that flight because of the teacher being on board. And I wanted to get there early before the traffic. So I got in just as my manager and my supervisor were heading over to the Launch Control Center. Here we were, and I got in. My manager and my supervisor, they left to go to the firing room, and as the day went on, the crew comes by. Actually, where I sat, my window faced the vehicle assembly building, and you could see the road that headed out to the pad, and we actually went outside to see the crew van go by, and then normally, if you weren't actually in the firing room working the launch, you were outside to watch the launch because you were 3 miles away. I mean, there wasn't going to be a launch. If you didn't have to be indoors working, you were outside to watch the launch.
And it was more than just watching the launch, right? It was watching and feeling and hearing this.
A shuttle launch was absolutely an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And I had seen a few before coming to the Space Center, including, as I said, STS-1. But being that close, I'd never been that close until I started working there. And yeah, it was amazing. The two solid rocket motors, when they ignited, they were like twin setting suns. They were just this brilliant orange. And the sound was, you felt it as much as you heard it. It was an amazing thing. Absolutely amazing. And just to see that thing rise into the air and go, it took your breath away.
Did you feel it? Did you feel the shockwave? But do you feel the heat too? Is that what? Or were you
not that I remember. I mean, you really just feel the vibration.
All right.
But that day was cold. It was clear, but it was cold. It was. I think it was freezing overnight, which is unusual for Florida, but in January it does get below freezing sometimes. It had warmed up to, I think, like high 30s, but it was still pretty cold. And we launched, and it was a little after 11:30 that morning, and we were outside watching the launch, and saw what happened. And it was difficult. I mean, it was something I know I wasn't prepared to see.
So, and I mean, it was pretty obvious to anybody who had watched them before that something was amiss.
We knew something.
So obviously, you guys knew that. I mean, it was.
We knew it wasn't right away. I mean, the contrail suddenly got bigger, and you couldn't see the vehicle anymore. And then you had in your mind this hope that things were going to be okay, until we saw the two solid rocket boosters flying away from that cloud on their own.
Yeah.
And then you knew it wasn't going to be okay. So, and then from there, we saw the pieces trailing away from the. I'm sorry. This is still hard even now. We saw the pieces trailing away from that cloud, and it was just silence after that.
Wow.
Nobody said a thing.
Wow.
And we just filed away back to our desks.
And what do you do? Yeah. So there must, I guess, and I guess there's got to be people who make conjecture, and people who, it was a while before they kind of came up with an idea. But was there
the immediate emotion was shock, obviously. I mean, there were people crying. One guy, crusty old grizzled veteran who chain smoked and everything, and he was in tears. And because he knew he had been there long enough that he worked with people who were on that crew.
Yeah.
And they had been there before the first shuttle mission, and they were the astronaut crew that the teams there worked with. So, I mean, people knew them. I mean, there were people crying. There were people just sitting there stunned. It was a horrible day.
Yeah. And so it's obviously not something you prepare for. Was there an official internal response to this thing? Was there a
well, it took days. There were things, the first week was really a blur. I mean, I can remember I can remember that someone set a TV up on a stand in the hallway so we could see whenever any news came on or anything like that. The next day coming into work, because we were right behind the press site, occasionally, and especially because of the teacher on this flight, there were more TV crews there than normal, more news crews than normal. And back then they drove these big vans,
Right, with
the
the big
satellite dishes on top. And when I came in the next day, the street where our buildings were on were lined with these things. They came from everywhere. And you know, and we you know, we eventually started doing things. There was an investigation that actually I even helped in, that had to do with confirming that all our connectors had been reconnected properly.
Yeah.
There was a database, and I was given the task to go through the database, and it was a learning experience for me. So I was given the task to go through that database and investigate to make sure that all of the connectors to all of our boxes, like we talked about last time, were connected, all the electrical connectors. At the end of that week, the launch was on Tuesday. The end of that week, I don't remember, it might have been Sunday, there was a memorial service, and it was televised nationally. I mean, I attended there. We were all in the VIP grandstand, which normally is where, you know, VIPs watch the launch. I mean, you know, where presidents would come and watch the launch, you know, back in the Apollo days.
Yeah, now it's a memorial. Yeah.
Well, and here we were for a memorial service.
Right.
And the other thing I remember from that week was that back in that time period, I would watch the McNeil Lehrer News Hour on PBS. That was what I watched, and they had only recently gone to an hour format, and so they did things to fill that time. And one of the things they did was they had a illustrator do like a comic illustration, not necessarily comic, but they did an illustration of the news. And on that Friday, as I was watching that, and they would show him actually doing the illustration. It was a thing that would happen live as he was doing it. It was electronic, but it was, you know, you watched him draw. And what he drew was a moon with an astronaut holding an American flag on it, and the face of the moon, and the moon shed a tear. And that's when I started crying.
Yeah.
That's before that point, I didn't, but that, I cried.
So that was winter of 1986.
1986.
You stayed right up until some more launches, or
I stayed there through 1986 and all of 87. And then at that point, we were working towards going back to flight. We had done some things we reviewed all the instruction manuals for how to process the vehicle. We reviewed all those because we had plenty of time. It was going to take a long time to correct the solid rocket booster problem, which was the main problem.
Yep.
And so we had time to do that, and then we started working towards the reflight. And at one point, they actually once they named the crew that was going to fly on the initial flight back, they sent the crew around, and this was a really good thing. I mean, they sent the crew around, and they basically got with us. They came to each building, and they got with us, and they talked to us and told us what was going on, and then they answered our questions. And we
Yeah.
didn't have easy press style questions. We had, we had engineer hard
questions. Right.
And they were absolutely gracious, and they answered all our questions. At that time, there was a new escape system that had been designed, and there were still lots of questions about that. So we were asking them about that. And so that was a really good thing that happened. So we talked to them. But as we started getting close to preparing to fly again, I realized that I wasn't really ready. I wasn't prepared to do that again. I wasn't really prepared to to stay. So I decided to move on. And I moved back to Michigan, and then proceeded with the rest of my life.
Yeah. So,
which is another story for another day.
Well, and the space program has moved on and has improved somewhat. There's still been some accidents and things, but now we have a different space program world these days.
Things are very different now. They absolutely are. In fact, it's quite amazing. This is what I had hoped when I started working at the Space Center. What's happening now is what I had hoped to be a part of, except it took another 40 years to get here. And it's actually quite amazing. I mean, between everything that some of the newcomers like SpaceX is doing, where they have done things that people said just weren't possible. Oh, you're going to reuse first stage boosters? There's no way you can do that.
Not a chance.
And
you're going to land them on a barge upright? No, not a chance.
Nah, and then reuse them quickly. It's amazing what they're doing. They've just keep and they're now developing this new rocket, which interestingly enough is what some of the early shuttle proposals looked like. It's basically a 2-stage rocket where the upper stage is completely reusable. It's a big, heavy lift rocket. It'll be taller than the Saturn V and the Apollo spacecraft when it's done. And they are just moving so fast on this. It's astounding.
All right, so here's the question then. So because we're running really low on time, but here's the one thing: Mars. Are we going to put people on Mars?
I think we will someday. I think before we go to Mars, I think we'll end up going to the moon, because it's almost as hard as going to Mars, but it's closer. And I personally feel, there's a whole big debate. Is it Mars? Do you go to Mars first? Do you go to the moon? Is the moon a distraction from going to Mars? There's people who want to just go straight to Mars. I think that we need to learn to walk before we run. And going to Mars is running. You go to Mars, you can't come back in 3 days.
Right.
You go to the moon, you can come back in 3 days.
Right.
And
that is one of those things about Mars. It's not only far away, but its distance changes, right? I mean, if you
because of the orbital mechanics,
right.
You can't just decide to come back. It's 6 months, and then you have to stick around for a while.
Right.
And then you get to come back. It's like 2 years. So you really need to be prepared to be there for 2 years to go to Mars with people.
All right. Well,
I think that's going to take a while.
Wow. That. Well, let's hope we can do that. Zach, do you want to sign up?
I mean, I'll go. I have nothing better going on right now. I can do something for 2 years.
We're gonna do remote bufnagle podcasts from Mars.
We'll be the first intergalactical Earth-based podcast.
I'll tell you that okay, here's what I picture, Zach. I picture the rocket going up, and as it scrolls past the window of the camera, instead of USA, it says BUFNAGLE with the little frog at the bottom. That's what we'll have to see.
That's perfect.
All right. Bob, America's favorite rocket scientist, thank you for coming on again. We will continue to drag all these memories, happy and sad, out of your rocket head. And
I'm more than happy.
We will discuss some more fun and silly things next time. I do appreciate we appreciate all our listeners. I realize this is, life is a wonderful thing, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have its sorrows. And I'm sure we all have stories like Bob's, not with rockets, maybe with grandparents or spouses or parents or children or whatever. We've lost people. But it's nice to know that all of us are in this together and that we're all riding the same planet, and we're all here to help each other out. Zach,
Yes.
anything else we gotta hit?
No, I think we got it all. We're pushing out episodes as fast as we can record them, so we appreciate all the listeners. Bob, we appreciate you coming on. If you have anything else to say to our listeners, now's the time to do it.
Well, I want to say thank you for listening to these stories, and I'm glad I hope you enjoy them, including this one. And I would be happy to come back and tell more stories about the space shuttle or any other topics that we find interesting.
We are actually really interested in the shenanigans that took place behind the scenes, but we'll leave that for a later day.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that all sounds fantastic. Bob, I'm sure we'll have you on again in the future to talk about the adventure of life. But until then, thank you all for listening. Go be the good, spread the good, and enjoy the adventure of life. Until next time, take care.